What happens when Putin shuts the door on peace talks, only to watch Ukraine launch one of its most surgical and shocking retaliation strikes of the entire war. Tonight, you're about to see how a single refusal triggered a chain reaction that tore straight into Russia's hidden command network, and why this moment could redefine the battlefield. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story begins with a moment the world didn't expect. Because when Vladimir Putin publicly rejected any possibility of talks, analysts thought it was just another political statement. But Ukraine heard something else, a declaration that the war would only escalate. And within hours, they responded not with words, but with the kind of precision strike that sends a message deeper than any negotiation ever could. Ukraine didn't hit a border post, a depot, or a random military target. They struck directly at Russia's secret command network, the nerve system that coordinates operations, communicates battlefield orders, and protects the Kremlin's core military structure. This wasn't improvisation. This was preparation. Quiet, calculated, intentional. Sources across the region say Ukraine had been tracking these nodes for days, maybe weeks, waiting for the perfect justification to launch. And Putin handed it to them. Tonight, we break down exactly how Ukraine executed this retaliation, why these command nodes even exist, why Russia tried so hard to hide them, and how their exposure may shift momentum at a critical moment in the war. Because this wasn't just a strike. This was a statement: if you shut the door on diplomacy, the battlefield becomes the only language left. Ukraine's intelligence units have been refining their deep strike strategy for months, building networks, intercepting signals, and studying every point where Russian officers believed they were invisible. These shadow command centers were intentionally placed far from major front lines, hidden inside industrial zones, residential buildings, and fortified underground bunkers designed to resist detection. But Ukraine's new generation of ISR drones, satellite partnerships, and Western-fed intelligence meant those shadows were no longer safe. The moment Putin dismissed negotiations, Ukraine's military leadership interpreted it as a green light to move forward with an already prepared operation, a coordinated hit on the most sensitive Russian targets. Multiple drones lifted off in synchronized waves, each programmed with different roles, some for reconnaissance, some for jamming, and some for direct strikes. Russia's electronic warfare systems managed to block a few, but not enough, not even close. One by one, these nodes lit up on Ukrainian command screens. The strike teams confirmed visual, executed payload releases, and within seconds, Russian comms across the region experienced spikes of static, blackout periods, and total system collapses. Russian officers scrambled to reroute communications, but the failure of these networks exposed something even more dangerous for Moscow: the realization that Ukraine knew exactly where to hit. Putin's refusal wasn't just symbolic anymore. It came with consequences that targeted the very backbone of Russia's ability to command its forces. What makes this retaliation so significant is the type of target Ukraine chose. Most strikes focus on ammunition depots, oil reserves, or troop concentrations. But this time, Ukraine reached for something deeper: the command architecture itself. Russia's war machine depends on a complex web of secured communication channels linking officers, analysts, and frontline units. Disrupting this network doesn't just cause short-term confusion, it fractures the decision-making chain and forces commanders into chaos mode. Eyewitness accounts from inside occupied regions reported sudden silence on Russian radios, officers running between buildings, and emergency vehicles rushing toward smoke rising from supposedly unmarked compounds. This wasn't simply about hitting a building. It was about hitting confidence, the confidence of Russia's most senior commanders, who believed their secure nodes were untouchable. Russian state media tried to downplay the damage, claiming interceptions and minor disruptions. But independent sources paint a different picture: total collapse in certain sectors, delayed orders, and even reported misfires from units that lost coordination. The symbolism is undeniable. Ukraine's message was loud: if Russia won't talk, we'll drag the war into the systems you thought were hidden. This strike didn't just weaken Russia operationally, it hammered morale at the top. And in wartime, morale is a weapon as powerful as any drone. Let's talk about why Putin rejected talks in the first place. Kremlin insiders have hinted that Moscow believes it currently holds strategic leverage, especially as winter complicates Ukraine's logistics. By refusing negotiations, Putin intended to project strength, signaling that Russia would not compromise, not slow down, and not recognize Ukrainian demands. But what Putin didn't expect was the timing. He didn't anticipate that Ukraine had been quietly preparing a retaliation that would counter his narrative instantly. By striking the command network right after rejection, Ukraine reframed the story. Instead of appearing cornered or desperate, Kyiv showcased capability, precision, and strategic initiative. They turned Putin's message of strength back on him, exposing the vulnerability of the very system he relies upon. Military analysts say this was psychological warfare layered on top of tactical warfare. Ukraine didn't just hit targets, they hit arrogance. They hit the illusion that Russia's military infrastructure was beyond reach. And perhaps the most important part, Ukraine's response proves that they can escalate selectively, not recklessly. They didn't strike civilians. They didn't hit random towns. They didn't react emotionally. They hit the precise heart of Russia's command grid. This is how modern conflicts are fought with timing, intelligence, and messaging. Putin wanted to demonstrate dominance. Ukraine demonstrated capability. And capability always outlives rhetoric. Inside Russia's military structure, command centers are supposed to be secured by multiple layers: anti-drone systems, electronic jammers, and classified routing paths. But Ukraine found the gaps. Some came from intercepted radio chatter. Some from satellite imagery showing unusual generator activity. Some from informants inside occupied territories who recognized unusual traffic patterns. Slowly, a map formed. A map of how Russia communicates and where the weak points were. Ukraine's strategy was brilliantly simple: don't attack every node. Attack the key nodes that create chain reactions. And that's exactly what happened. When one node fell, adjacent ones overloaded. When a second node got hit, the system rerouted to weaker backups. By the time a third was struck, the network collapsed into a disorganized mess. Russian officers were forced to use older communication systems, slower, easier to intercept, and vulnerable to jamming. Ukraine essentially downgraded Russia's battlefield capacity in a single night. Think of it like cutting the power lines to a giant machine. The machine still exists, but it can no longer move the way it's supposed to. That's why analysts call this retaliation a turning point. It wasn't about explosions. It was about disconnecting Russia from itself. One of the most shocking elements of this operation is how Ukraine executed it with near zero casualties on their side. Precision drones, low-altitude flight paths, and coordinated timing allowed them to strike deep into Russian-controlled territory without risking pilot lives or exposing their own assets. These modern drone systems aren't just machines. They're data platforms. They record, analyze, adjust, and strike with near-instant decision-making based on real-time inputs. Combined with Western satellite relays, they become weapons that can see through darkness, fog, and even certain types of electronic interference. Russia, while technologically advanced in many areas, has struggled to counter this new wave of drone warfare. Their jamming systems often overload or misidentify drones due to their small radar signatures and adaptive flight routes. What's even more remarkable, these drones didn't crash after completing their strikes. They returned with full reconnaissance logs. Ukraine didn't just hit Russia, they scanned Russia. They learned more about how these command nodes were structured, how they reacted under attack, and which officers were desperately trying to restore order. Every strike produced new intelligence. Every explosion was also a data capture event. This ability, this fusion of offense and intelligence, is what makes Ukraine's new strategy so dangerous for Russia. It means every strike is not just an attack, but an upgrade. Russia's reaction to the strike was chaotic but predictable. Kremlin officials scrambled to project control, claiming the damage was minimal. But behind the scenes, multiple emergency responses were launched. Troops were rushed to secure compromised facilities. New encryption protocols were issued, though many couldn't be deployed because the command network itself was damaged. Officers were instructed to use backup channels, many of which were decades old. In some regions, communication dropped to levels seen in the early weeks of the war. This is more than a logistical problem. It's a security crisis. When commanders lose secure communication, they lose the ability to coordinate artillery failure, request reinforcements, they update troop positions, they track drone threats, share reconnaissance data, respond to Ukrainian advances. This forces them to operate slower, more cautiously, and with far less situational awareness. For soldiers on the ground, confusion spreads faster than fear. When orders don't arrive, units freeze. When communications fail, mistakes escalate. And when leadership appears disorganized, morale collapses. That is the true power of Ukraine's strike. They didn't need to destroy Russia's forces. They only needed to disconnect them. And disconnected armies make fatal mistakes. Let's zoom out and look at the broader implications. This isn't just about one night of strikes. This is about a shift in Ukraine's strategic posture towards deeper, more targeted operations that impact Russia at a systemic level. The war has moved into a new phase, the battle of networks, intelligence, and strategic disruption. Russia's overwhelming manpower advantage matters less if its command system is fractured. Its artillery superiority weakens if its targeting data can't move efficiently. Its frontline coordination becomes vulnerable if communication collapses. Ukraine knows it can't match Russia in raw numbers. So it's attacking what Russia needs to use those numbers effectively. And that's why experts say this strike wasn't a one-off. It was a blueprint showing how Ukraine plans to fight the next year of this war with precision, with intelligence, and with psychological dominance that forces Russia into a defensive posture even far behind the front line. With every successful strike, Ukraine sends a message. We can reach you anywhere. Not just your troops, your systems, your infrastructure, your command. When a smaller force develops the ability to target the nervous system of a larger one, the battlefield changes. And that's what we're witnessing now. There's something else happening beneath the surface. Russia is facing internal pressure. Intelligence leaks, intercepted communications, and new Western analyses reveal that frustration is growing among mid- and high-ranking officers who feel the Kremlin underestimated Ukraine's technological evolution. Some officers reportedly warned that these command nodes were vulnerable, that security protocols were outdated, that jamming was inconsistent, and that Ukraine was collecting more data than expected. But their warnings were ignored. And now, the consequences are impossible to hide. The Kremlin is caught between two difficult paths. One, rebuild the command network, which could take months and billions of rubles, or two, continue operating with a damaged system, risking further strikes and more operational breakdowns. Neither option is good. Both options weaken Russia at a time when the war demands tighter coordination, not looser. This is why Ukrainian officials called the operation proof of concept. It demonstrates that Russia's military backbone is not unbreakable, and that Ukraine's deep strike capability can evolve faster than Russia can rebuild. When a military machine begins to lose confidence in its own systems, cracks form, and those cracks become opportunities. Opportunities Ukraine has proven it can exploit. This retaliation may be remembered as the moment Russia realized the war could hit its critical organs, not just its front lines. As we reach the end of this report, one thing becomes clear: this was more than a military strike. It was a psychological blow, a strategic message, and a turning point in how Ukraine chooses to respond to Russia's decisions. Putin's rejection of talks was meant to project strength. Instead, it triggered an operation that exposed weakness. Ukraine showed the world that it doesn't need massive offensives to change the equation. It just needs precision, intelligence, and the will to strike where it hurts most. The command network Russia believed was hidden wasn't. The security Russia trusted failed. The confidence Russia projected cracked. And this raises a defining question: if Ukraine can do this now, after years of war, with limited resources, what might they be capable of as technology advances even further? This conflict is evolving. The strategies are evolving. And tonight's story proves that the side with better intelligence, not bigger numbers, may ultimately shape the battlefield. If you found this breakdown powerful, insightful, or eye-opening, make sure to like the video, subesk RB to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support helps us bring you the world's most important military and geopolitical stories, clear, fast, and accurate. Thank you for watching.